Okay, so give me 1 second. We'll do questions. Given my practice, found that the senior attorneys fully focused on my own local market. I'm starting to feel the pinch of the global growth opportunities. How can I effectively explore other markets without spreading myself too thin or it is my current client base? I don't know what type of work you do. You could be doing personal injury. You can be doing corporate real estate. To a lot of times, it just depends on your practice area. Certain practice areas, it's going to be very difficult for you to move. So I would recommend, it depends on your practice area. But if you're finding limited growth opportunities in your local market, there's a lot of different things you can do. One thing would be, trying to look like a good attorney in your practice area in a way that you can attract work from other markets. That's one thing. Or you can look at other markets in the United States. Let me just see if I can open something. Give me 1 second here. Go, because I'm going to pull up one thing. So if you look at a map of the United States, I always like doing this and showing this to people when I'm working with them. Let me show you here on a big map. Okay, so the map of the United States is like huge. I see people in Maine moving to different places. I see attorneys in Ohio, like looking at Wyoming. And so there's really opportunities pretty much all over. It's Kansas, another one. So looking at different markets is just, I don't know about jeopardizing your place, but if you're a senior attorney, there's always going to be jobs in other markets. And your odds of getting a position, by the way, are much better when you start looking at places where there's not a lot of attorneys. So you can move to Missouri and Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, all these places where there might not be demand in your existing market, but there is in your market. I remember not too long ago, I had a partner that was losing his job in Chicago. And he applied to firms like in Taos, New Mexico or something. And there's actually big firms there. At the time, it was like Mayor Brown and all these things. And he ended up getting a job at one of those firms. It was funny, but there's just, there's all sorts of markets that you can move to. Yes, this is a good question. So it's just a general type of question. So what are the main traits that big law firms look for in candidates other than previous experience in large law school? Okay, so large law firms, honestly, if you went to let me just look at law school rankings here real quickly. I'll do that now. U.S. News law school rankings. So I'm going to tell everyone now. So this question basically is, what law school that you go to, can you get a job in a big firm? So let's go over that. So of course, Stanford, Yale, all these sorts of things. Actually, Yale can be difficult to get a job in a big firm because they assume we're going to leave. But Stanford, I was ranked Duke, Harvard, and Virginia. She was ranked 4. Wow. Columbia, NYU, Northwestern, like all these top law schools can get a job fairly easily. But it's interesting, like when you're starting to look at these schools. So when you start getting down to like not as easy, Georgetown, there's a lot of people that come out of Georgetown. So it's a great law school, but it can actually be, you can see how many people are there. It can actually be quite difficult. Minnesota is difficult to get into a lot of large firms from because it's where it's Texas is okay for Texas, but it can be hard to get stuff out of there. So as you start going down in these rankings, like University of Georgia is ranked 20. I don't know that I've ever placed someone from University of Georgia in a large firm. I think that UNC is actually regarded, the University of North Carolina is regarded. We'll start getting down in these firms like Notre Dame, South Carolina, BU. It becomes Ohio State. Like these are firms where it becomes very difficult to get into large firms like Texas A&M, and BYU is good for people. There's a large Mormon community in different cities in the United States, so that can be good. And so I'm just reviewing all these schools. University of Florida, difficult to get into large firms. And so as you start going down the list, I don't see people from Florida and Arizona, Washington, I see people, but Arizona State, not many. U of I, some. Iowa is interesting. You sometimes Cravath recruits from there, but a lot of these schools, as you start going down, fewer and fewer people. I would actually rank these schools much differently based on where people get jobs. That actually might be interesting to do. But Indiana, so you start going down this. So I would say that the easiest schools to get jobs, the top law firms if you go to, tend to be, let's see, Duke, Harvard, Penn, Virginia, Columbia. Yeah, these are all like these top schools. I think these schools, like the top 9, are the easiest. If you go to one of these to get a job in a top law firm, if you do well enough there. I would say Northwestern too. Michigan's probably okay. Berkeley, yeah, it's okay. CLA becomes harder. So when you start getting down below 12 and you start going to these firms, it becomes much harder. So the school you go to is important. But what I want to point out, and so this is very interesting, like people from these firm schools get jobs all the time. And I see people from Pepperdine get jobs in large law firms. I don't see people from University of Tennessee. But these schools, like if you go to them, I don't see people from Wayne State getting jobs really outside of in the big firms. I was working with the one that went to Wayne State. She was first in her class and didn't have the best personality, but wasn't getting jobs in large law firms outside of Detroit. Anyway, so the idea with the law firms, the largest law firms will hire people from the best law schools, typically like the top 12, but you can still get a job in a major law firm regardless of where you go to school. The logic of that is that what large law firms look for, they look for your practice area, and then they'll often look at your, look at your school, look at your grades, et cetera. But the most important thing is that a large law firm is looking for when they're hiring laterally is they're most interested in your practice area and then the quality of the firm you're at, and then also what else it look at, and then how difficult it is for them find people them to find to find people to work there. So it's interesting. I remember, let's look at law school rankings again. So let's see, Pace Law School. So this firm is ranked 136. I remember and it's not a highly ranked firm that you normally wouldn't see people going to best law firms. But I remember when the market was very busy for corporate attorneys in 2000, 2001, all these people, I saw people from Pace University Law School working at places like Sherman and Sterling. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. And that's a very good firm. And it was very good back then. And I couldn't believe it. But that was because there just were not enough people to do the work. So the main thing that the law firms are looking for when they're hiring laterally in large law firms is they are concerned about your school. But what they're really most concerned about, and this is always the case, is they're most concerned about your practice area. They're most concerned about the quality of firm you're at. They're most concerned about how difficult it is for them to find people to work there. And then another one is your business when you start looking more senior and how much clients are willing to pay for. There's some firms that you'll never get into. So the firms like some of the top New York firms and top firms in Los Angeles and the best names, Gibson, Donald, Melvany, Morrison and Forrester, Skadden, Cravath, whatever, Sherman, Sterling, things like that. Sure. There's certain firms that if you don't start out at a really good firm, you'll never get into. But there are firms that you can get into if you have business that will hire you. And when you get more senior, lots of big firms, they don't care where you went to law school. And you can often get into big firms as an attorney if you get experience in a very rare practice areas. You have things like patent, just ERISA. A lot of people do ERISA, lots of practice areas you can go into. Patent, ERISA, let me just see here if I can pull up some practice areas in BCG. There's a lot of practice areas with real estate where there may not be a lot of attorneys with your background. And because of that, you can get into large law firms if you have a lot of experience in that practice area. And they're more concerned about that than where you went to law school. I remember I had this candidate years ago, and he'd gone to University of Utah or something for law school. I don't know what it was, but not a top law school. And he was working at a firm in Boise, Idaho. It was a good firm. I forget the name of it. And he wanted to move to Los Angeles, and he called me, and I didn't think like much would happen. I thought that he would not get a job, but I decided to represent him anyway. And the firm was at a good reputation in Boise. I applied him to all these firms in Los Angeles, and he got all these interviews. I couldn't believe it. And I got in my car and drove him around, helped him look at neighborhoods and houses, and he got jobs at all these big firms. He ended up taking a job at a firm that I didn't get him a job at, but he did very well. He's still a partner in big firms. And so it was a practice area. The firms needed real estate. And so they brought him in and he was at a good firm. And so he got into a top AmLaw 50 law firm. So it's often the practice area that you choose that you're in. Let me see if I can pull up some practice areas in BCG just so you can see. I can talk a little bit about practice areas that you're most likely to get jobs in if you decide when you become an attorney. or when you are an attorney, what kind of practice areas are they most likely to get jobs in? Okay, so this is like our internal database where we look at things for candidates. Let me just make sure I get the practice. Where are the practice areas here? Sorry, I'm looking for one. I want to show everyone the practice areas where you're most likely to get a job. Okay, so this is practice areas. Okay, what kind of practice areas are smart if you didn't go to a great law school and you want to get a job in a large law firm? Alcohol beverage law, there's not a lot of those jobs. Antitrust and competition, almost impossible. But if you do litigation, that's possible. Art and museum law, that's not just something that large law firms do. Bankruptcy to smaller firms is going to be very difficult. Cannabis law, yes, been here as much now, but it was a big practice area a couple of years ago. So yes, you can get into a top law firm sometimes if you do that, because there's not a lot of people if you didn't go to a top law school. Construction law, typically large law firms don't do this because the fees aren't as high. If they did do it, then if you do like a developer and that sort of agreements, you might have a shot. Corporate is really one of the best if you want to go into large law firms. So you have all these kind of practice areas within corporate. So if you get experience doing that, that's very useful. What practice areas can help you get into a large law firm? Investment management, yes, if you did, that's a good one. Compliance and contract, corporate general, sometimes, but the largest law firms typically are more specialized. So if you were doing M&A at a smaller firm, didn't go to great law school, that's one good one. Private equity is a good one. Securities and capital markets are a little bit more difficult because in most cases you would need training in a really good law firm. Tech transactions, no. So people used to think, oh, that they're really good practice areas, but no. So in corporate, if you didn't go to a top law school, you want to work in a top law firm, you should get experience, and you can move to a large law firm if you get experience in these practice areas and the market's good in whatever area of the country you're at, or you want to relocate. So corporate asset investment management is very good. Corporate M&A is also very good. And all these practice areas, by the way, you're much more likely to get a job in a large law firm as someone that didn't go to the best law school if you get experience in one of these practice areas and one of the ones that's well-defined. So if your resume says, hey, I do nothing but corporate asset investment management, you're going to have a much better chance of getting the job in a large law firm if you say, hey, I do compliance, I do M&A, I do private equity. Large law firms and their clients hire people that are in one practice area and experts, because if you go to someone that does only private equity, they're going to be a hell of a lot more effective and know a lot more and be better with their time and stuff than if you hire someone that does M&A and private equity. So M&A is a good one, private equity, technology transactions, securities and capital markets, no. And you probably wouldn't be doing securities and capital markets at a small law firm anyway. And then venture capital emerging companies, another one. Criminal law defense, no. Data privacy, no. People think that's a great practice area to go into. It's a real dud. It's not what it's cracked up to be. So many people now are going and getting these certifications and stuff. I see people get interviews in it, but it's a much harder practice area. Everybody and their brother and sister is trying to get this and go into it. It's just very difficult. Education law, large law firms typically don't do it, but sometimes they do. It can be very good. I think education law is actually a very good practice area to go into. If you go into this practice area, you're going to have there's not a lot of people to do it. Doing this practice area, I think, is very smart. If I was a young attorney, this is something I would think about doing. I've seen lots of people have very good and long careers doing it. It's a very smart thing to do. You can do educational defense. You can do plaintiffs, which is a very good thing, and you can sue school systems and things. I had a funny experience though. There was this guy that I knew, and he had done all this stuff. Like he'd started this software company and for attorneys, and then it failed, and then he went and sold insurance, and then did all these different things. And I hadn't seen him in 3 or 4 years. And then one day I was in this store, like waiting for my food. I was walking secondhand furniture or something. It was next to a restaurant where I was buying food and waiting for it. And anyway, I walked in there. He told me he was doing plaintiff suing schools for reasonable accommodations and stuff. He always had an angle for getting money, but it's just education all around. So good practice area. Large law firms typically don't do it, but it's a very smart practice area. Energy, oil, and gas is a very difficult practice area to get into. There's not a lot of jobs around the country. Staying employed in the long term is very difficult. I have attorneys that do this, and they certainly get jobs, but it's much harder than in other practice areas. And it's also very difficult to move to larger law firms. If you do want to move to a larger law firm and you do this, you're always better off doing transactional related stuff. And that's a rule that I would say for all attorneys is that you want to do anything that you can do this transactional nature. You're always going to have a much better time or a much better chance usually of getting the job than in other practice areas. So energy, oil, and gas are very difficult to transition into larger firms. But the nice thing about, I mean, there are firms like Baker Botts and things that do it, but the nice thing about energy and electric and stuff is that you can, for fees that you get, the ability to attract clients is much better than the practice areas. So I've seen a lot of attorneys do this and they have a very good ability to attract clients. Entertainment, new media, another big one, but this is almost impossible to move to large law firms. In LA, I've seen very few people do it. Very few people. Most of the clients in IP are not that big. Like the studios, they don't spend a lot of money. The actors don't spend a lot of money. But if you did want to do it, getting experience doing transactional work is the best. Or you can certainly do IP, but anything to do with transactional, meaning putting together deals where you're raising money for clients and so forth. You can do that sometimes in a smaller firm, would do a larger firm, but it's very difficult. It's just not something that happens a lot. So sports law and media law and everything is a waste of your time if you want to do that. And I'll try to go through these very quickly because I know I'm spending a lot of time on it. I know people probably, this is a lot. Environmental land use, very difficult to move to larger law firms. But the best practice area that if you would want to do that under environmental would be land use and zoning. That's, if you get experience in a smaller firm and you want to move to a larger firm, that's really the best practice area to do it. There are some work and litigation and so forth, but it becomes much harder to move. And you can, if you do environmental litigation, defense is the best one. Anything to do with ERISA is very good to move to large law firms, and regardless of the school you went to. That is a very good practice area if you want to move to a larger law firm, is to get experience in ERISA, regardless of where you went to law school. If you do well in ERISA, you can get an executive compensation. There's not a lot of people to do it, so it's good to move to large law firms. Family law, surprisingly, there's some large-sized law firms that do it. You can move in family law oftentimes to larger firms. If you get experience in that and you don't go to the greatest law school, you can do it. There's some large firms that do it, but it's better to have your own career doing family law than that. In terms of finance, all these practice areas typically are going to be done by larger firms. But if you wanted to do finance with banking, that would help you move to larger law firms. There's not small law firms really that do project finance. Public finance could be like bonds and things. You can move in that. Structured, and then transportation finance, you really have to be at a large firm. Food and drug law, yes. If you get experience doing that, you can move to a larger firm, but there's not a lot of firms that do it. Franchise law is difficult. General practice, no. We're almost done with these. And then government law, government contracts is probably the best. The rest of these practice areas, you pretty much need to have gone to a large law school. Health law, you can move to larger firms all the time, but mainly you want to do transactions. Litigation can be good. This is a very hot practice area. So if you're a new attorney and you want to go into a practice area, health law is very good. Immigration, no. Most large law firms do not have immigration. So if you do that, you're not going to work in a larger firm, but it's a good practice area. Then insurance, yes, you can move to a larger firm if you didn't go into a great law firm, a great law school. That would be regulatory and insurance coverage if you have experience doing that. Insurance defense, insurance plaintiffs, trucking, all these large law firms do not do this work. So, but insurance defense is a great practice area to be in because you'll always have a job. IP, yes, you can move into large law firms if you don't have experience in the best firms. Anything to do with patent is pretty much where it is. IP litigation, not really, but patent, you can move to larger law firms if you have anything to do with patent, regardless of where you went to law school, often within reason, you can move to large law firms. Most patent attorneys, by the way, they come out of law school, they don't do that well because they're engineers, often taking classes at night, but they get into small law firms, get experience, then move to larger law firms. Patent is one of the classic ones where it doesn't matter where you went to law school. Trademark and copyright, yes, you can, but there's just not enough jobs, so it's difficult. Labor and employment, yes, you can. Doing employment defense, counseling, and labor-related stuff, not wage and hour. But the problem in employment law is most large law firms don't do it because there's not enough money. And then in terms of litigation, really all these different types of litigation, ERISA litigation, yes, all the rest of the types of litigation, there's typically, they expect you to, with healthcare law, it's okay. They really expect you to have gone to a good law school in terms of doing litigation. Some of the practice areas that might be okay for litigation be trust in the states and that municipal law, most large law firms don't do it. But if you do municipal law transaction, real estate, yes, that's a classic one where people can go into large law firms or they get experience in smaller ones. Happens all the time. Doesn't matter where you went to law school, pretty much all of them. Tax law, it's very difficult to move. Telecommunications, difficult. Trust in the states, yes, you can move to larger law firms if you get experience in it. This is the very active practice here at the moment, but the only ones where you'd be able to get the jobs would be estate tax planning and trust in the states. So I'm sorry for going into so much detail on that. I wasn't trying to bore people, but I did want everyone to understand how you can move to, if you don't start out in the big law firm or you're not working in the big law firm, you didn't go to a good law school, the practice area that you're in. And the practice area you're in typically will determine whether or not you can get into a large law firm. And the final lesson is that most of the practice areas need to be transactional in nature. Those are the easy ones. The problem, and typically those are the ones where you can get them. And then the more kind of obscure ones like patent and ERISA tend to be the easiest. So I hope I answered that question. This next question. In my current market, there's a saturation of attorneys specializing in my field. How can I identify which legal markets have a higher demand for expertise? What steps should I take to transition to market? Okay, so this question, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. If there's a saturation of attorneys in your market, you need to apply to markets where there's not a lot of people like you. So typically the markets where there's not going to be a lot of people are going to be smaller markets where people don't want to work, or markets where the work is booming. And so you can find that out. You can go to Law Crossing, which is my site, just why I'm promoting it. You can go to Indeed and simply hired, and when that's simply hired Indeed, and then there's some listed one you got there. Law Crossing, LinkedIn. Just looking at those different cities and seeing what's going on, where there's the most openings is really the smartest thing. Okay, it's another good question. So this is a very helpful question. When an attorney's experiences one area of law, how is it easy to transition to another area of law? Is it feasible to market oneself as a junior attorney? If you're in one area of law and you want to switch practice areas, that's actually, you can do it, but it's very difficult. So when you switch practice areas, you typically need to you're not going to get hired if you switch practice areas, typically at a firm of your caliber, the one you're working at. The reason is because they can hire people that are working at the same caliber firm that aren't trying to switch practice areas. So if you were a law firm, would you want to hire someone that was in one practice area and had experience there, or would you want to hire someone that's trying to switch practice areas? So law firms are more likely to hire people that are in one practice area and are committed, as opposed to someone that's trying to switch practice areas. I mean, you would do the same thing if you're an attorney. So they're very difficult. So typically law firms are ranked like this. We rank them like this. We rank them 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So a 5 is just incredibly prestigious, top 0.5%. So, there's no top 0.25, whatever, top, 1 in 10,000 attorneys even qualify. But not really likely anybody's going to get a job there. These are your typical AmLaw 100 law firms, AmLaw 100, 200, 200. And then these are your 3 firms are going to be mid-size, et cetera. And then your 2s are going to be typically primarily work for, these are BCG rankings, individuals that are the same, lesser in client, that's very individuals. So the idea is that if you're trying to switch firms, and this is what happens. So what happens is typically you'll have an attorney that is at a 1 or 200 top boutique that's at one of these firms, and so they're trying to move to other firms, switch practice areas. They can do it, but they probably have to go to a 3 firm, right, and switch practice areas. And then if someone is at a 3 firm, mid-sized firm, typically servicing clients, but not like the largest clients, these firms are servicing big, giant companies. So these firms, your mid-sized firms, if someone wants to switch practice areas, they either have to move to a less prestigious mid-sized firm, or they would have to go to a 2 firm that also does some work in that practice area. So the idea is if you try to switch to another practice area, depending on how long you've been practicing, it can be very difficult because law firms are businesses and they're typically going to hire people that are always already in one practice area. And that can help quite a bit that's what makes it's much more difficult to switch to a firm that's a peer firm than it is to for another one. Doing this one at the top because this looks like the interesting one. This is the most recent question. Okay, well, I worked with a sole practitioner all through law school as a paralegal, and then for 1 year after passing the bar as an attorney. Fortunately, due to COVID, I've had mostly e-discovery and other temp legal positions. Since then, I'm worried that my career is dead in the water. I have a few selling points for my candidacy. I wonder what's the best way to make myself more marketable and move jurisdictions to find work currently. Okay, so I'm going to say a couple of things now that are going to piss people off, and I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings, but I'm not trying to, and I don't want to do that, but I'm going to do it. The first thing is, this is a good question because a lot of people have this question. You could say the question is, should I work as a contract attorney? Should I work as a paralegal while I'm an attorney? All those sorts of things. So the answer is no. So anybody that passes the bar and is an attorney should always work as an attorney. You should never or work as an attorney where you're working on things, where you're representing clients, whatever. And that's what you should do. You shouldn't, e-discovery could be a very profitable practice area, and some people will do that as a career. But what I wouldn't certainly recommend anybody that passes the bar. If you pass the bar, you should be an attorney. You should never do something where you're doing temp legal positions or working as a contract attorney. That's insane. No, you do. So why? No, you don't. You work as an attorney. You always work as an attorney. And again, I'm not trying to help you hurt your feelings, but work as an attorney if you pass the bar. No, I understand legal e-discovery is, but you always work as an attorney if you pass the bar, not an attorney representing a real client. So that's what you do. So you work as an attorney. You don't try to work in something else. Like, why? You represent real clients. If you pass the bar, this up here, pass the bar. Now, if you didn't pass the bar, that's another thing. But you always work as an attorney representing clients. If you pass the bar, it's going to be harder. It's more difficult to represent clients or to get a job in the most competitive client in the market. So Washington, D.C. is an incredibly competitive market. You have to be crazy. D.C. is ridiculous. There's so many people, I don't know what the percentage of the population that's attorney, but it's very high. No, you don't have to concentrate on trying to work in the most competitive markets. That's absolutely insane. So you should try to be looking at other markets. And if you're an attorney, you want to represent real clients, you have a couple options. So your option is start your own practice. That's one option. You start your own practice. The other option is you find attorneys that will hire you as an attorney. To find attorneys that will hire you as an attorney. So people are under the impression that they have to do all this type of work. If they don't get a job in a big firm or they don't get a job, they have to work as a contract attorney or do e-discovery. And the answer to that is absolutely freaking not. No one has to work as a contract attorney or do e-discovery or take temp legal positions if they pass the bar. The only thing, and this is advice from Harrison, that's going to change your life if you listen to me, which a lot of people don't, but your job if you're on this call, you're actually someone that is on it. Like, you know exactly how to do all this. Let me just see here. And you can get a job, but you have to find a job by looking. If you're in DC, look at here, we're in DC. Where's DC in here? Washington, DC. You don't even see it here, right? It's so small. But anyway, so if you want to work as an attorney, you go into practice areas where you find things that you can do as an attorney that other people aren't doing. So you could do, just giving you an example, workers' compensation, law firms in Washington, D.C. You can do that. You've got you'll find all these different law firms that do it, and you'll find all these people. Look at this. There's all these law firms that do it. So you can work as an attorney if you apply to one of these law firms. There's pages and pages of people in D.C. doing that. They're attorneys. So you can apply to your job, by the way. I just want to be very direct with you. Your job as an attorney is to represent yourself and go out and find positions. That's your job, and find work. If you can't find work, then how are you supposed to find clients? So my advice to you, and this is a wake-up call, is you need to go and look for attorneys to work with that aren't getting applications. You apply to people, you have 20 pages of workers' comp. And what practice areas do? You do personal injury. You do trust and estates. I'm just giving you trust and estates. You do what else? Personal injury, trust, workers' compensation. I'm just telling you the types of positions that you try to find if you pass the bar and you don't think you're good enough to get a job in a big firm. You have to be looking at practice areas where you can get jobs. No one, by the way, no one on this call, if you're an attorney or a law student, no one on this freaking call cannot get a job. There are so many freaking jobs out there, it blow your mind. The places you can work. You do not need to ever work as a contract attorney or be unemployed. You can find jobs in firms to do trust and estates. You can always find workers' compensation jobs. You can always find jobs where you're doing like real estate eviction and things. You can find jobs doing that. You can find jobs where you're doing workers' compensation litigation, where you're doing, the big one would be product liability plaintiffs. You could do that. You could do professional liability plaintiffs. You can do medical malpractice plaintiffs. You can do insurance is the big one. You should be applying to every single freaking firm that does insurance defense to be an attorney. I don't care. They might not pay you a lot, but you're going to get the experience. You should do that. There's so many practice areas. You can apply to construction law firms. You can apply to, what else do we got here? You can apply to firms that do, in terms of bankruptcy, they do labor and employment. You can apply to labor and employment plaintiffs firms. That's a big one. You can apply to insurance defense is huge. You can do insurance plaintiffs. You can do healthcare plaintiffs. Let's see, healthcare litigation plaintiffs. You can do, these are all practice areas for people that didn't go to good law schools and think they're unemployable. You can do family law. That's huge. Anybody here can do family law. You can apply to family law firms. All of these practice areas too, by the way, family law, trust and estate, immigration. I know so many attorneys that came out of law school, like bottom of their class, and they were able to start their own law firms, and now they're like incredibly successful. So family law, you can do mass torts litigation. You can do education plaintiffs. Anybody can do that. You can get into that. You can't do really corporate. You can do bankruptcy, like representing consumers and that sort of thing. You can do, what else? Construction. You can do construction plaintiffs, or maybe just even construction law firms. So there are so many frickin' practice areas where you can get jobs. If you didn't go to a good law school, if you feel like there's no jobs out there, you can do it in Washington, D.C. There's so many of these frickin' practice areas, insurance defense. You can do family law, all forms of plaintiffs work. You can do it, immigration. So again, I'm telling everyone out here, I just want everyone to understand, this is freaking huge. Like, all you need to do, if you feel like you can't get a job, you feel like you didn't go to a good law school, you feel like you're unemployable, you have a bunch of choices. You could actually start law firms. You could do personal injury, trust and estate. You could start law firms doing that. You could go to a workers' compensation law firm. You go to insurance defense law firm. These law firms, by the way, they don't care where you went to law school, most of them. They'll hire you. They just need people to do the work. Family law, you could start your own firm or go to a firm. So these ones with asterisks, I know so many people that, even people that left their large law firms and started their own firms. These are all practice areas that you can do regardless of where you went to law school, regardless of what stage of your career you're in. All of these things you can do regardless of where you went to law school. Education plaintiffs, all forms of plaintiff's law. Come on, there's so many freaking things that you can do as an attorney to where you can get jobs in law firms regardless of where you're at. And look at this, pages and pages there's 243 results when I do a search for workers' comp. So I'm just showing you there are so many places you can work. You can apply to these firms and just say you want to work there. They don't have to have openings. All these firms, workers' comp, and there, insurance defense, family law, you can apply to all those places and they will hire you. They may not pay a lot of money, but you'll get experience. You can also start these firms with absolutely no experience. You can start a law firm regardless. We just have another question. Next question. DC is ridiculous to get a job. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it okay to say that you're looking because the company is restructuring during a merger? Yes, of course. This is the problem. This is the problem with in-house. A lot of people think going in-house is a great idea, great career move. The problem with going in-house is CEOs change, and then they bring in a new legal department. The legal department, the general counsel leaves, and the new person comes in. The firm is experiencing financial issues, and so they let people go. There's just millions of things that can go wrong with the companies. Yes, it's okay to say whatever you need to say when you're in-house to get a job. People will hire you. You have to, it's fine. But I would just want everyone to say that it's very difficult to go in-house because this kind of stuff happens all the time. I read stories about, I was reading a story yesterday about all these, what do you call these electric car companies that started. You have Rivian and Fisker. Fisker's getting ready apparently to go out of business. And all these different firms and things where there's issues. And so you just need to be very careful. Companies, when you go in-house, you could lose your job very quickly. You need to be aware that a lot of bad things can happen depending on the firm you go into. Okay, sometimes, despite putting tremendous effort in showcasing skills, I found myself constantly overlooked for opportunities within my firm. How can attorneys assert themselves and ensure they're not being sidelined for advancement? Okay, so the only way to assert yourself, you don't have to be the best attorney. You don't have to be the most political attorney. The big thing is that law firms are caring about is how many hours are you billing? So there are hours. Are you billing? That's really one of the most important things they care about. So how many hours are you billing? That they're very concerned about that. They want to know how many hours you're billing. So that's, if you bill a lot of hours, they like that. If you do good work, very good work for people, they like that. And if you go above and beyond, they like that. So I remember when I was working on a federal court, there were all these law firms that would come in for different cases. And we were in the courthouse I was in, they represented like Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical would have these cases where they'd be sued by banana farmers in different parts of Central America where they'd sprayed chemicals or something. Anyway, so they had a lot of big cases actually. And so most of the cases were from like attorneys who were local, like in Detroit and stuff. But I always noticed when attorneys came in from big cities like LA or New York and stuff, they always made a point of going into the clerk and flattering her. When they would submit documents and things to the court or to the clerk, they were always like, the presentation was different. They would do things like, if they put a paper clip on stuff, they would put like a Post-it note and wrap it around the things so the paper clip was easier to take off. They would just do all these different things that other attorneys wouldn't do. And when I started practicing law, I also noticed that the best attorneys would also do things that the other attorneys wouldn't do. They would work the hardest hours. They would ask the best questions. They would make sure that they did things better. And how do you do well? You go above and beyond, and you tell people you do the best you can for people. I remember when I started my career working for this federal judge, and I was always of the impression that you need to do more than everything as best as you can, and you need to give a little bit extra effort. One example was when I was growing up, I used to do things like shovel snow for my dad and haul it and things. And I remember when I was very young, like I was 10, the Japanese auto companies had overtaken the U.S. by doing such much better work. Their product was better. Things didn't fall apart. There was just so many things that they did that other people didn't do. And so their cars were better. So I remember I was shoveling snow for my dad, and then the job was shovel the driveway. I did shovel the driveway, but then he said, you have to do above and beyond in any job you do. I did things like I shoveled paths that go into the house in different ways. I would shovel paths. What else would I do? If there was snow over an Audi, and I'd take that down and brush off the hood of his car, the windshield. There was just little things like that you could do extra. And so you can do that as an attorney too. Like the best attorneys will always do extra. They will give more service to their clients. They will do things better than others. And people like that. Another example was, I remember I was working for this judge, and he would come in, he would get there 8:30 on the dot or 8 o'clock in the morning on the dot every day. And I noticed when he got there, he used to go up to it was in a post office, but it was a clerk's office. He used to go up to the clerk's office and grab his mail every day. And then he would also, when he came in, he would put coffee in the coffee maker and start brewing coffee. So I realized that that's what he did. And I wanted to give better service. So I went and I would get his mail in the morning and I would have the coffee made, like get freshly made, like 8:25. And then I would put the cup out. And so he liked a certain cup and I would put that cup out for him so he could pour himself coffee. You try to go, and again, it's a simple explanation, but you try to go above and beyond what people expect of you. If you go above and beyond what people expect of you, then you're going to do better and you're going to have a better career. If you do extra for your clients, you do extra for the people you're working for. And you don't do average service. You get better service. The thing is, as an associate or whatever, you're working for partners, you're working for people with business, or you're working for senior associates. So you need to impress them. You need to do the best you possibly can for them and make them feel like you respect them and give them good work because that's what they want to feel like. As an associate, your client is the people that are giving you work. So if you do good work for the people that are giving you work, then they're going to advance you. If you make them money by billing a lot of hours, they're going to advance you. If you do the best work possible, if you go above and beyond, if you show them how much you care, if you anticipate things that they need in advance, then you're going to do better. And this is very important. You are in a law firm when you're a young attorney to advance and to do good work for people and to learn. A lot of attorneys think, oh, I'm getting a job in a law firm just to make money. And if they don't pay me the most, I'm going to leave. No, as a young attorney, your job is to learn a skill, typically takes about 5 years to become proficient as a litigator or as a corporate attorney, as a real estate attorney, meaning you will be learning things if you go to a firm for 5 years and you need to be around other people to learn things to become more proficient. And you should be giving the best service to those people because those people will be references. They will talk about you in the legal community. They will refer things to business to you. You don't know, but you have to do the best you can. And so very few people do this. I talk to people all the time that don't, and it's a shame. Okay, I've been offered a position in a different legal market. I'm concerned about the cost of living and quality of life compared to where I currently reside. How do I weigh these factors when considering a move? Yeah, so you can look at taxes. Different places have different taxes. You can look at taxes. You can look at quality of life. That's important to you. Quality of life. You can learn. Yeah. So if you don't like those things, then there's no reason to move. The cost of living is too high for you. I'll talk a little about cost of living and quality of life. But the main thing when you're an attorney, depending on what level of attorney you are, your job really is to learn a practice area and take a train. Job is to learn and get trained. So that's really your job as a younger attorney. So that's one job. And then also a job of a new attorney is to get exposed to the most sophisticated work you can, So meaning bigger clients, meaning you'll work on more sophisticated manners of business. So if you do that, that's important. And then also to work with people you like and where there's opportunity. So those are what you should be concerned about as a young attorney or whatever is when you're moving. So quality of life and cost of living. So that's okay. Sometimes people value the quality of life and that's a big deal. So typically when attorneys move are working in smaller markets, there's often a lot more stability with those firms. There's often better hours. It's a better place to work and are happier. So that's important. You want to be happy as opposed to unhappy. I had this experience, it was interesting. I had this attorney that I was working with and and I told the story before, but it's an interesting story. He was unemployed and looking for a job. And he was a member of the Federalist Society, a Republican and all this stuff. And I got him a job at like this firm in San Francisco that had never used a legal recruiter. That was all these Republican in San Francisco, which not like the most normal thing because San Francisco, like beyond liberal. I don't even know what it is, but it's so far left. And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying it's very rare to have it was probably the only Republican firm. So he got this job there and the job said paid like $200. And then he got a job at a giant firm in New York that paid $350 or whatever, a lot more. And he decided to take this firm job at this giant firm as opposed to where he'd gotten where this Republican firm. And he went to this giant firm and he worked 2 years there, getting to work at 8, working till 2 a.m, 6 days a week, and just completely got burned out and left there and never practiced law again or for a few years and was in horrible shape. So these are things that you need to be aware of when you're looking for a job. You don't need to go to the biggest firm. You need to put yourself in a position where you're going to be happy. Okay, this person's question is, were the attorneys you mentioned transferred to other states already members of that state's bar? Presumably the answer is yes. Want to verify? No, you do not need to be a member of a lot of states' bars. Sometimes you can waive in, depending on how long you've been practicing. But you don't. It's not possible to become a member of a state's bar from that there. And a lot of times, law firms will hire you even if you're not a member of the bar. Now, there's some firms where places where it's extremely difficult. Florida, you pretty much need to be a member of the bar. To Florida, California, some of these places really do expect you to be members of the bar when you apply. So you can't do it there. I mean, there's other ones in Delaware and a bunch of them. Let me just take a look at the U.S. map again, just to give you an indication of where they are. U.S. map. Yeah, there's certain places where they expect you to be a member of the bar. Florida is the biggest one, and then California, and then a lot of these other states you can waive into, depending on. You can look. There's a BCG bar reciprocity guide. Sorry. Okay, so this is just an example of what is this one. So look at that, 576,000 views. Those are half the attorneys in the country interested in this. So I'll put this in. Is there a place to put in the chat? There's not. But I would just look at this title. What is bar reciprocity and which states lie right from the bar? That's an important article to review. That will give you an example of what states you can waive into and what states you can't. It's very interesting article. There's charts and things in here, but you can see here, mission on motion, so Alabama, Alaska, all these different things, Connecticut, Colorado, Connecticut. It's not that difficult a lot of times to get into these states, and then you can be admitted on motion, all these things right here. So it's not, and then some of these, you take exam things. So I would look at that chart, but no, it's not like you always need to be admitted in different things. Okay, so someone asked a question about remote jobs. Yeah, there's a lot of remote jobs. You can certainly apply to those, and people can get jobs on remote jobs. Often you don't need to take the bar for that. And it's not, these remote jobs typically you can certainly apply to those. A lot of jobs are actually marked as remote right now, and law firms like that. You can definitely look at remote jobs. And that's smart as well, and you can stay in the city you're in. Let me just see here if there's any other good questions. Okay, no, I think that's about it. Thank you everyone for being on this webinar. I think this is very useful. I do want to do a resume webinar in the next week or two. If you were on this webinar today, I will send a notice out about it to you shortly. And then, yeah. So I certainly appreciate everyone being here. I think this webinar was incredible in terms of what you could have learned if you followed the advice and we're looking in multiple markets. And I certainly appreciate everyone being here today. Thank you so much. And I will be here next week again.